first of all, I think you need to understand how these images are derived. And I think by understanding how they're derived, that might give you a sense of how reliable they might be. So you acquire a volume of data, and if you think about the data in terms of tiny little blocks of, we talk about voxels and pixels, right? So a voxel is a volume element of tissue, a pixel is a picture element. So the volume element of tissue corresponds to the picture element that you see on the screen, right? Now, each of those individual small little blocks that make up this large volume of information or this large volume of tissue can be looked at in various ways. Traditionally, when you look at a CT scan, you're not actually looking, again, in much the same way, you're not actually looking directly at the tissue, and it's important to always bear that in mind. You're looking at a computer algorithm's depiction of the tissue, right? Even in a simple CT scan, looking at an axial slice, you're looking at a depiction of what we call a sinogram, and the attenuation value is being rendered adjacent to one another and rendered in a certain format based on what the barriers of the tissue look like. But we know now, after several decades of using that type of imaging, that these are reliable, because you see the CT, you go to the OR, and you don't get a big surprise, right? So that's that. Then when you come to something like 3D representations, depending on on the specific vendor and the specific software, there is a different algorithmic approach to depicting the tissue. The value of cinematic rendering is the fact that what's actually going on is algorithms are plotting the trajectory, believe it or not, of thousands, in fact, tens of thousands of photons of light from multiple directions projected onto each and every voxel. And then the algorithm then takes all that information, all those trajectories of those photons, and it converts it into a depiction of the structures as you would have seen them if you were looking at a photograph, which includes considerations of like, where's the light being directed from, how much of a shot. I don't know if you guys do much photography or film or anything like that, but depending on directionality of light, depending on things like shuttering, depending on a number of parameters, you can actually depict these structures in various ways, which is what allows us to visualize the layers that we see. It also is what allows us to visualize the different depths and the shadowing of structures on top of one another. So the short answer after all of that is to say that, yes, I think overall this is an accurate representation of the anatomic structures, but I think you do have to be aware of the fact that there have been several layers of processing, and that the layers of processing are dependent on individual decisions as to how they want to depict various structures. Did that answer your question? Did that
yeah, absolutely. And I'll say it's a very exciting part. I mean, I'm interested in neurosurgery, right? But like, I think the big future for the surgical approach is actually a lot of this imaging, because you can only innovate so much in the way you actually operate, but the way that you make operating easier with this type of imaging and similar is like a huge, exciting future for us looking into surgical specialties. And so it's really exciting. And it's good to know that it's it's an accurate thing that we can use.
Yeah. So on that basis, again, very useful when you want to be aware of, for example, vascular structures. So you can see you have your common carotid artery, your carotid bifurcation, your internal and external carotid and the various branches, and you can see the vertebral artery here. And again, there are different ways you could render this. So you could render this in a way that shows the bones a lot more clearly, that shows the granularity of the surface more clearly, that shows the vasculature more clearly, or not. So it's important to bear, but again, that's what it comes back to your question, you could, so for example, if you were considering whether or not there's a small vessel coursing close to a tumor or something like that, you could filter that in or filter that out depending on the algorithm. And I think that's where a mistake could come in, not being aware of the fact that something is being filtered in a certain way. But I think overall the technology is reliable. Now a second, a corollary to that would be, well, could we use this? Because when you say something's reliable, you kind of have to say reliable for what exactly, right? So if you were planning to use this, I mean, and we can go on various tangents, but just briefly, things like augmented reality or virtual reality, or using this as overlays in surgery. If you're looking at robotic surgery with anatomic trajectories to place your instruments, this is not going to be reliable. And this is not going to be reliable, not because the imaging is unreliable, but because the technology of overlaying imaging on physical objects is not reliable. I think I just throw that out there because what you'll probably see either now or over the next few years, a lot of vendors purporting to have technology that allows you to visualize structures directly over the skin, and in the majority of cases, that's actually not the case. There's actually a significant margin of error. The best algorithms that we've seen have been probably a minimum of 8 millimeters of error if you try to overlay digital information on soft tissue.
Hey everyone, Ryan Rad here from neurosurgerytraining.org. If you like that video, subscribe and donate to keep our content available for medical students across the world.